All right, so today I want to talk about this story out of the Post-Millennial, and it's titled CBC Busted. Panelist who defended We Charity was paid $40,000 by Trudeau government. And they're referring to Amanda Alvaro. Obviously, she didn't disclose the money, but again, the main point here being is, I mean, there's many points here, I guess, to kind of unpack. The first one being is that I mean, this just seems like it's the millionth example of the CBC just proving their bias and the fact that they literally are not even close to being objective in that they literally have people who are on the news talking about a massive story that literally were paid by one side or one party involved in said story. And again, I mean, not only that too. I mean, everybody. I mean, anybody with that's halfway paying attention knows um, that CBC is basically paid by the government to help pay their bills. I think they get over $1 billion. So um, and that not to mention too, a lot of that money is largely dependent upon them continuing to be biased, right? Because why would the Trudeau government give CBC more money if they didn't think that it was going to benefit them? It makes no sense. And anybody arguing the whole they did public broadcaster and all that garbage, like come on, like if Trump gave NPR money, would people honestly be arguing that that was honest and that they were honest and objective, even regardless of what they reported on? Like, come on! Like, imagine if Trump gave NPR a bunch of money, right before the whole Russia collusion investigate, or right around that kind, right, in the middle of it, and they started, downplaying it, saying, "Oh no, it wasn't a thing," even though, like, again, the reality was is that it was a complete nothing burger. But for sake of argument, again, would anybody be arguing that NPR was unbiased, like, or was impartial? Like, come on, people! Like, I don't know how. Literally, the mental gymnastics that some of these people have to play to defend CBC literally absolutely astounds me. Like the mental gymnastics that they play, I can't even imagine what it's like. But again, most of these people are in such massive bubbles that they don't even realize it. Like they don't even realize the bubble that they're in, which is why they can rationalize this kind of stuff. And I think the other thing too that with these leftists is that they tend to just project, and I think projection is their way of basically not having a guilty conscience, and that they can, in the back of their mind, they can be, oh, we can just project, and because anybody with half a brain knows that whatever the most of the stuff the left accuses the right of, I mean, a lot of the times the right is guilty of, but almost all the time the left is guilty of as well. I mean, you look at the whole racism thing. I mean, the left supports many racist policies, namely diversity hiring, um, any form of diversity quotas. I mean, the California wants to repeal the Civil Rights Act so they can hire based off race. Like, come on, like I could go on and on and on. Not to mention too the guy that's the Democratic presidential candidate supported the 90. He actually, I believe, introduced the crime bill that is responsible for many blacks unjustly being in jail. Again, like I could go on and on. So again, it's just largely projection. But again, the other big point here too is that this just makes the whole We scandal look even worse. Like again, this We scandal is getting. It seems like once a week or so we get this massive news story that just makes it look worse and worse. I mean, we had the stuff yesterday with the Quebec company that got, what was it, $300 million that hasn't to provide masks by July, and they still haven't done any of it. I mean, we have we buying Justin Trudeau's mom a very expensive car, like all this kind of stuff is very, very, very insane, I guess, to say the least. But um, the other point too to point out, like I said, is just the and again the one thing too, the other thing I guess to point out is that I don't like hating on CBC and Justin Trudeau all the time. Like it does get a little bit boring, but the reality is that as boring as it can be, and as that just repetitive that it can be, um, you wouldn't have to do it. I wouldn't have to do it if they could just not do such a terrible. I mean, I don't think they're intentionally doing a terrible job. I think it's just nefarious intentions. I don't think. Again, I don't think that Trudeau is um, just ignorant or stupid or what, like a lot of people like to accuse him of being. I think that it's just sheer nefarious intentions. CBC, not to mention too, CBC is simply just following the incentive. The incentive is we can either be honest and objective about the news, which means we're going to lose a lot of money because again, the Trudeau government's going to stop giving them the over $1 billion a year if they were actually honest and objective. So again, it's just simply it's an incentive, and that's the problem too with this kind of stuff is that. Um, I mean, the mainstream media shouldn't be given public money. There should be no public money given to the mainstream media because, again, as much people like to argue, we need a public broadcaster and all that garbage. No, the reality is that when there's money involved, especially massive amounts of money, corruption is inevitable. Corruption is inevitable. It's going to happen because there's so much money available. Again, the leftists, again, they're so ignorant of reality that they think on one hand, if you're in the corporate world, I mean, CBC aside, that money is just too much, and we need to have infinite amounts of regulations to prevent against corruption. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's like, oh no, we don't need anything. Who cares? No one's going to be corrupt. Like again, like they're that um they're not ignorant because I think they know in the back of their head that literally their argument is, oh well, if our side does it, it's perfectly fine. If their side does it, it's the worst thing in the world. And they would make the same argument in reverse, which they're right about to an extent, but the part that they're wrong about, like I point out ad nauseum, is that it's the average leftist voter's solution to the problem that's going to make it worse. The average right-wing voter does not support corporate corruption. They just don't. But the average leftist voter absolutely supports a massively bloated um, public sector where bureaucrats and these unions are making tons of money based off corruption. Again, so that's the one difference that people say, oh, they're all the same. No, they're really not. Um, and I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, that's the thing too is that these leftists never point out, oh, well, public schools are, the average, a classroom of 30 kids is well over $300,000. The leftists never, they never have ever said that there isn't enough money um, when it comes to anything involved with the public sector. The left has never said that. They will never say that because the reality is that they want the most amount of money there as possible because the more money there is there, the more it benefits the left because unions almost exclusively give money to leftists, whether it's the Liberals or the NDP. They almost exclusively give money to them. Not only that, too, a lot of people are forced to give money to said union, which ends up in the hands of the Liberals and the NDP. So again, it has nothing to do with what's best for the kids or what's the best form of healthcare. No, the reality is that they want more money in the hands of the unions and which ends up in the hands of the left. And again, if they actually believed in what they believe, they would have no problem, like I've said a million times, with with competition to public schools, for example. They would have no problem with that because if public schools actually were better, they would simply outcompete any other form of schooling and destroy them, and we would end up right back with public schools. But the reality is that everybody knows that that isn't the case. Everybody knows that that isn't the case. So again, getting back to the main point here, again, this just makes the whole We scandal look a lot worse, and it basically just discredits CBC even more than they're already discredited, which was way more than enough to never trust anything that CBC says. But again, this is just another example of you know massive corruption too. And this is the other thing too that I've talked to people that say, oh, I'm so tired of watching the news and seeing this whole We scandal. I'm like, what planet do you live on? You're more worried about the virus with the 0.1% death rate, um, or you'd rather watch hour after hour of news on the virus with a 0.1% death rate, but you're perfectly fine with the federal government taking hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars and giving it to their friends, which a lot of that money will end up siphoned off and taken by them. And not only that, you're perfectly fine with watching the news and having one of the people giving their opinions on it literally being paid off by one of the parties involved in it. Like it's so insane. It's not even funny. But again, are things going to change? Not really, not really. I think it's very clear at this point that the Trudeau government will get away with this. I mean, it has loosen their support in the polls a little bit, but my guess is that that will be a temporary thing. Next election, I mean, they're probably not going to call an election anytime soon unless a bad leader comes in, but I highly doubt it because this whole scandal has definitely reduced their approval rating. But I think they know, and I would guess that people will forget about it. I mean, you look at, if blackface wasn't enough to reduce Justin Trudeau's support, if all these other scandals weren't enough, then I don't think anything will. I really don't think anything will. But anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So if you haven't hit that like and subscribe, make sure you do that. And also check out those other links that are in the description. Make sure you follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. And stay tuned for more videos.